Before we begin, I want to address something. Our last documentary on Kush sparked strong reactions, particularly around how the 25th Dynasty was described. History is powerful, and when it touches identity, it can stir deep emotion. But this channel is committed to one thing above all: precision. So today, we're going to slow down, step back from modern assumptions, and look carefully at the historical reality of Egypt and Kush as the ancient world understood it. Egypt has always been an African civilization. Let's begin there. Long before modern borders, long before modern politics, long before race became a battleground in historical debates, Egypt rose along the Nile in Africa. Its culture, its people, its gods, its monuments, African. But history is rarely simple. And when we talk about the Kushite kings of the 25th Dynasty, when we say they ruled Egypt, what do we really mean? Was it conquest? Occupation? Foreign domination? Or was it something far more complex? Today, we untangle the truth. Not to inflame, not to divide, but to clarify. To understand the 25th Dynasty, you must first forget the modern map. There was no Egypt and Sudan as we know them today. There was the Nile, flowing north, carrying life, trade, language, religion, and power along its banks. To the north, Lower Egypt. To the south, Upper Egypt. Further south, Nubia, the land later called Kush. But these were not separate worlds. They were connected, economically, spiritually, culturally, for thousands of years. They traded gold, ivory, cattle, incense. They shared religious devotion to Amun. They intermarried. They fought. They allied. They influenced one another constantly. The Nile was not a border. It was a bridge. For centuries, Egypt had dominated parts of Nubia. Egyptian pharaohs built temples in the south. They stationed officials there. They extracted gold. But Nubia was never erased. It adapted. It absorbed. It grew stronger. And when Egypt weakened, fractured by internal divisions and foreign pressure, power shifted. Not from outside Africa, but from one Nile civilization to another. History isn't owned by outrage. It's built through evidence and discussion. If you've been part of the conversation around our last documentary, we invite you to engage here respectfully. Share your thoughts below, and stay to the end, because what happens next completely reshapes how we understand the 25th Dynasty. And if you value nuanced, evidence-based storytelling about African civilizations, make sure you're subscribed. We're just getting started. Out of Napata rose a king named Piye, a devout follower of Amun, a ruler shaped by both Nubian and Egyptian traditions, a man who saw Egypt divided and believed it had lost its spiritual legitimacy. When Piye marched north, he did not present himself as a destroyer. He presented himself as a restorer. His inscriptions speak not of foreign conquest, but of cleansing temples, of restoring proper worship, of reuniting lands under divine order. He adopted full pharaonic titles. He embraced Egyptian art, religion, and kingship rituals. This was not an outsider rejecting Egypt. This was a Nile ruler claiming it. What does dynasty really mean? Modern language makes this confusing. When we say a black African kingdom ruled Egypt, it can sound like Egypt was something separate, something foreign. But the ancient world did not organize itself that way. Egypt had always been African, and its dynasties were never frozen in one place. Power in Egypt moved. Sometimes it rose from the delta marshes of the north, sometimes from Thebes in Upper Egypt. At times, rulers of Libyan ancestry took the throne. families who had settled in Egypt for generations and integrated into its elite. No one describes those transitions as Egypt becoming non-Egyptian. They were shifts in political gravity, changes in which regional power center held dominance. That is what a dynasty was. Not a nation-state, not a race, not a passport. A dynasty was a house of power, a lineage that secured military authority, won recognition from priesthoods, performed the sacred rituals, and maintained ma'at, cosmic order.
If a ruler controlled the two lands, was crowned according to proper ceremony, was acknowledged by Memphis and Thebes, and honored the gods, he was pharaoh. Legitimacy flowed through ritual and recognition, through Amun's priesthood, through temple endowments, through military supremacy, through the ability to restore order in times of fragmentation. The Kushite kings understood this system intimately. They did not attempt to erase Egyptian tradition. They embraced it. They did not invent a new throne. They claimed an ancient one. They were not foreign occupiers. They were the 25th Dynasty. In the logic of the ancient Nile, that was enough. Not because of race, not because of geography, but because power, ritual, and recognition converged. That is what dynasty meant. And that is why the Kushite rulers belong in Egypt's king lists, not as outsiders looking in, but as one chapter in a long, shifting story of who held the two lands at any given moment along the Nile.
Piye and his successors, Shabaka, Shebitku, Taharqa, ruled from both Napata and Memphis. They rebuilt temples. They revived artistic styles from Egypt's Old and Middle Kingdoms. They restored religious authority to Amun's priesthood. Their reign is often described by scholars as a renaissance, not foreign occupation, cultural restoration. Egypt did not become non-African. It remained what it always was, an African Nile civilization, now under a dynasty from the southern Nile. So why does this spark so much tension now? Because modern identity is powerful. Because colonial-era narratives distorted African history. Because for centuries, some historians refused to accept that advanced civilizations flourished deep in Africa. But clarity matters. Precision matters. Egypt was African. Kush was African. They were neighboring Nile civilizations in constant interaction. When Kushite kings ruled Egypt, it was not a racial event. It was a political and religious consolidation within the Nile Valley. History becomes dangerous when simplified. When Rome later encountered Kush, they did not describe Egypt as foreign to Africa. They described powerful Nile kingdoms. They negotiated treaties. They recognized equals. The idea of rigid continental identity was not their framework. That is ours, and we must be careful not to project it backward. The 25th Dynasty does not diminish Egypt. It enriches it. It shows that power flowed along the Nile in both directions. It shows that civilization was not static. It shows that Africa's history is interconnected, layered, complex. Egypt was not ruled by outsiders. It was ruled by a dynasty from the southern Nile, a dynasty that saw itself as legitimate heirs to pharaonic tradition. One Nile, two thrones, shared sacred authority. And when we understand that, we move closer to truth, not louder, but clearer. And clarity is strength.